So I'll go ahead and start. Liberation and bondage. What do we mean by liberation and bondage? One of the fundamental teachings in the Mahayana is that the ground is emptiness. The path has no characteristics, and the result is beyond aspiration. Based on that teaching, if a bodhisattva believes in liberation and thinks she can aspire for that liberation, her belief in a result is a form of bondage. But if that bodhisattva then enters samsara armed with skillful methods, like compassion, motivated by the wish to liberate sentient beings, the result is liberation. This is what Vimalakirti meant when he said that if a bodhisattva's meditation is undistracted but lacks wisdom, it is bondage.
So, a bodhisattva is ill if she meditates. And if her meditation is free from distraction but lacks wisdom, she gets worse. In fact, that's when the bodhisattva gets really sick. Similarly, the kind of undistracted, one-pointed, calm, abiding that modern Vipassana practitioners so cherish is also a fundamental sickness. A bodhisattva will only be free from sickness if she can taste the flavor of her meditation. For instance, through the practice of calm abiding. But rather than settle for a state of calm abiding, if she knows the skillful methods necessary to transcend and undo calm abiding, to go beyond being burdened with the ability to concentrate, then the bodhisattva will be liberated.
I was reminded of the talk on Sunday that Sarah gave about calm abiding. So these paragraphs made me think of how she had mentioned there was a period of time where she spent too much time possibly in calm abiding. So I'm glad we're reading these paragraphs tonight.
My understanding is that calm abiding is another word is shamatha. And there's shamatha and vipassana, and I can't remember the third one. I'll look it up while we're reading. And they're all aspects, they're all different facets.
It's kind of a spiritual bypass, isn't it?
The calm abiding, or?
Yes.
It can be, I think.
I mean, in this sentence. Yeah.
I think he's assuming that it is for people that are Vipassana practitioners that practice that way, which seems very judgmental.
Well, I think the whole one-pointed calm abiding, I think that's an important distinction. I think it's pretty easy sometimes to fool oneself into thinking that a practice is calm abiding and that suffices and that's enough. But sometimes it's it's necessary to use other tools, I think.
I was trying when I was sitting today to be aware of my breath, but not to be focused on it, but to be aware of my breath and the noises in the room and the temperature and all kinds of things, but in a real soft way. And it was something that I hadn't done before, but I don't know exactly how that connects, but the calm abiding that I think is being talked of here is something that's done with a lot of effort to be calm, and I was trying to watch my breath without any effort, but just to be aware of it like something else in the room.
Donna, it might be your turn. Donna, are you back?
Did you want to read?
Oh, did you want me to read?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Okay. Where?
Let's see. Are we?
Where am I?
It is
Oh, here?
if a bodhisattva has wisdom.
Oh, okay. I see. If a bodhi, how do you say that?
It's bodhisattva.
Bodhisattva is wisdom, but that wisdom is devoid of any skillful methods. In other words, if her wisdom lacks compassion, it is a sickness. But she will be liberated if her wisdom is accompanied by skillful methods. How does a bodhisvata
Bodhisattva.
become bound up, constrained, or enslaved by skillful methods that lack wisdom? What causes that kind of bondage? I just love the artwork in this.
Vimalakirti says that all the views, emotions, propensities, and virtuous deeds that have not been dedicated towards the enlightenment of all sentient beings will bind a bodhisattva. How does a bodhisattva attain liberation using skillful methods accompanied by wisdom? By dedicating everything towards the enlightenment of all sentient beings.
Well, can we define sentient beings? Well, no, seriously, because for me, a cockroach is a sentient being. A tree is a sentient being, although firmly grounded in the earth. And so my exterminator disagrees with me about the cockroach, and the Austin Utilities disagree with me about killing my trees. And so I'm just trying to figure out at what point, where does the line lie? Because for me, I even think there's sentient energy in things that seem non-sentient. And so I'm a bit overwhelmed about having to be wise toward and skillful and when I have no problem being compassionate toward non-sentient, what people perceive as non-sentient. And I know Peg told me I cannot leave this life without causing some harm. To think I can is just absolutely naive and foolish, but I just need a definition of where our parameters are when we talk about our practice. Because if we aren't dedicating our compassion and wisdom and energies toward all, not that what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm a little tired. Not that I yearn for enlightenment, that's not something I even think about. But I certainly would like to bring to my arsenal all the things in my practice that serve liberation. It was a simple question with a long preface and after and after. Sorry, folks. So what do we define that as? How what are the parameters?
So I think
For,
that's still really up in the air. I mean, different people define that in different ways. I think one way that it's defined as the experience of sensation and reaction to sensation. So, ability to experience sensations and then to react to those sensations. So, in that way, cells, viruses, you know, and who's to say, you know, different cultures have certainly very different definitions.
personally, Nelda, I agree with your definition of sentient. If something is alive, I do consider it sentient. I have even seen my plants. Um, I have a bougainvillea, and for quite a few years, there has been a plant that I thought was a weed, really trying to strangle it. And because inert is a vine and it eats from the bougainvillea, taking away its food. The thing is that last year I couldn't do anything about it, and it grew wild. And the other plant that is around the bougainvillea that are flowers, they also grew as much as they wanted to. And I was really thinking I was going to lose the bougainvillea. To my surprise, there was not too much rain. And it seems that once I stopped fighting the weed, they became a community. And it turns out it was the first time that the bougainvillea did not need water. It seems that the plant that had always been robbing the nutrients from the bougainvillea was actually feeding it. And the thing is that the other flowers only grew on the outside of the bougainvillea. So it looked like I had planted it that way. So to me, with a plant, you cannot really see a reaction right away. But they do feel, they do react. And I do think that when we respect the environment and the ecosystem where the plants and the living beings live, and that will also include us, the better the world is. So I think it's all intertwined. And the other thing that I wanted to say from the reading is that it seems that to gain liberation is when you are not looking for it for yourself, but you're looking for the liberation of everybody else.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's interesting to think about all sentient beings include myself. So it's not everyone else, but it's everyone, which puts kind of a different light on it to me. Looks at it from a little bit different angle.
Should I go on?
Yes.
What a great way to practice non-attachment. It goes without saying that we must aim at having no attachment to possessions, fame, family, or even our own self. Yet Vimalakirti seems to be indicating that there is something beyond all that. Having no attachment to the path, he says, will liberate you from all other forms of bondage. Wow. But isn't it only possible to develop that kind of ability once you are already quite a powerful and mature spiritual practitioner? Well, no. Vimalakirti and Manjushri suggest quite the opposite. Even someone as ordinary as I can and should start to practice feeling no attachment for either the path or the result. And we should all get into the habit of always dedicating our practice toward the enlightenment of all sentient beings. And it seems that this practice even is beyond trying. It's just doing it. Does that make sense to anyone?
Sure, you can't try to be joyful. You're either actually joyful or you're not joyful. You can act joyful, but internally, you're
I
either
mean,
joyful.
if you're trying to be generous, that would kind of counteract the whole process, I think.
Well, trying is part of it too. I mean, nothing is left out, in my opinion. That our trying and our failing and our aiming and our path,
Part of the process.
it's all part of it. Yeah, it's
Thanks for that.
Imagine you were given the opportunity to witness a conversation between Plato and Lao Tzu. Imagine that as a philosopher, you had the ability to appreciate their insights and were extremely eager to learn from them. Once it was all over, wouldn't you want to boast about your experience and show off what you had learned? Wouldn't you commit to memory as much as you could of what those two thinkers had said about human rights, fate, predestination, free will, and so on? That's how I feel about this conversation between Vimalakirti and Manjushri. The difference is, though, that what they talked about was so much more profound than mere ontology.
Actually, what I should do is simply read and complete the conversations presented in this sutra. That alone could do me a great deal of good. Even better could be if I didn't contemplate them at all, but just read their words with a completely open mind without making any assumptions or harboring any expectations. If I could just leap into the text without a moment's hesitation and with wholehearted devotion, I could quickly be liberated from the burden of confidence and doubt. I could reap even more benefit by simply putting the text of the Vimalakirti Sutra on a high shelf in my room, offering candles, flowers, incense, and food, then venerating it as the most profound conversation ever to have taken place on this earth. Doing that could even my understanding of this text and an entirely different level. But look at me, I am torn between wanting to increase my knowledge and make extensive notes on the one hand, and on the other, wanting to brag about those two spiritual giants and impress you with quotations from their conversation. That's why I am writing this preface. At the same time, my own inability to make head or tail, or even a fraction of their discussion is deeply humbling.
Before I start with Sariputra, what a lovely way that last writing mirrors me, and I'm sure perhaps others. This is how I bounce around between things, right? Just as he does. And anyway, Shariputra. As Vimalakirti Manjushri talked, Sariputra examined the empty room. There aren't any chairs here, not even mats, he thought. These great bodhisattvas, arhats, and dignitaries have walked all the way to Vaisali to visit this merchant, but there's nowhere for them to sit. Where are all his chairs? Instantly reading his mind, Vimalakirti said, "Hey, Shariputra, did you come here for the Dharma or to sit in the chair?"
In all honesty, Sariputra couldn't care less about where he sat. But as the discussion that followed about seats and the desire to sit is such an important one, the Buddha's blessings must, once again, have put the thought into Sariputra's mind. These incomparable beings didn't waste their time on trivia. Chairs or seats of any kind are about longing to make a home somewhere, to dwell or to nest. They are about taking the weight of your feet, occupying territory, being idle and not moving, all of which is significant because the discussion now touches on the subject of alaya.
When we behave badly, if we don't redeem ourselves, we suffer consequences. When we behave well, we reap benefits. But until either result manifests, where does the power of those causes and conditions go? Where is it stored? Where does it dwell? Where is its seat? It must be somewhere. In this conversation, a seat represents references, basis, or foundations, and what carries over from one life to the next. Basically, it's about the continuity of karma.
As a comment before I start reading, like that's where the chairs went. If you don't have this seat, okay. These days, even science has noticed that a thief who was sentenced to a jail term last year at the cellular level, a completely different being 1 year later. Yet, in the relative world, we continue to believe in continuity and that cause, condition, and effect are carried forward. Many commentaries have been written on this subject. In the conversation between Vimalakirti and Manjushri, we discover that Buddhism teaches there is no such thing as true and permanent, independently existing soul that takes you into the which takes you into the next life or heaven or enlightenment. Neither is there such a thing as a truly existing ground.
You like to read, Donna?
Vimalakirti's response to Sariputra's question about where they should sit is witheringly sarcastic. Those who long for a seat to sit in are not looking for Dharma. To wish for a seat, he said, means you are looking for a foundation, a reference, a dogma, a system. It means you want to nest.
I get the feeling that Vimalakirti equated the way we deluded beings interact with the world, how we judge, talk, think about, and value things, with the way cow dung drops to the ground. Once it hits the earth, shit doesn't move. Similarly, once we get stuck with an idea, it becomes so entrenched as to be virtually engraved on our minds. When Sariputra asked for somewhere to sit, Vimalakirti seized the opportunity to explain that wanting a seat indicates a longing for somewhere to settle down. If you want to settle down, he said, you are not looking for the truth, for Dharma. The only way you can find the truth is by constantly having the rug pulled out from under your feet. And that means there is no time for settling. In effect, it means there is no such thing as longing to be settled, no sitting, and no seat, which is where things start to get complicated.
But I
I'm
do
glad.
want, oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I Go on.
I was just going to say, I'm so glad to find out that things that had not been complicated until now.
But I do want Dharma, insisted Shariputra. I'm not just looking for somewhere to sit, of course. Of course I'm not. I only mention it because I'm a guest in your home, and as you are my host, it's only natural for me to bring up the fact that there are no chairs or mats for us to sit on. It doesn't mean I'm not here for the Dharma.
But Sariputra, if you desire Buddha or Dharma or Sangha, retorted Vimalakirti, you don't desire the truth. What you are looking for is somewhere to settle. And in your case, you want to settle down in the three great seats of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. If you're looking for the truth, you wouldn't be willing to settle for merely understanding the truth of suffering or the ability to abandon the causes of suffering. Okay.
These are pretty big statements. If you genuinely want the absolute truth, you will not settle for the cessation of suffering. And if you genuinely want to understand the truth, you will not settle for practicing the path. Wow, Vimalakirti is really tough. But however contradictory his statements may appear to be at first glance, actually they are not.
No matter where you wish to settle or what kind of settling you're searching for, it's not the truth, even if you settle for enlightenment. You are like a fly. Flies love to settle on, I don't use that word, or anything that stinks. Enlightenment,
And we'll come back to the pictures.
I'm sorry, it looks like
Enlightenment has a very strong
smell, and so you are attracted to it. So all you really want to do is land on enlightenment and settle down into it. You want to glue your four limbs to enlightenment so you can stay there forever. This is the kind of settling you are looking for. You're not looking for the truth. Therefore, Shariputra, if you really want the Dharma, you must first learn how not to want it.
I'm finding this very helpful. I don't know about the rest of you.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
You mean the
Agree.
art?
It's beautiful.
You said you're finding
What we're
helpful.
reading, very helpful.
Oh, what we're reading.
I find it interesting that he's not seeing the phrase truth or the word truth as another seat.
As another, what word did you use?
Seat,
Oh,
another position, another uh, place to settle, as if there is one. One.
If he would use just the phrase truth as opposed to the truth, I would be more comfortable with it, because truth is different and changing and impermanent and evolving. But if and I haven't really looked closely enough if he's talking about the truth. I don't believe in the truth.
I think he's using it as synonymous with the Dharma.
Hmm.
Vimalakirti's refutation of Sariputra's insistence that he does want Dharma by exposing what wanting the Dharma really means is long and again often sarcastic. But once he had said all he wanted to say, Vimalakirti miraculously summoned enough of the most beautiful thrones in existence for every one of the Buddha's great disciples to have somewhere to sit. But there was a catch. The thrones were gigantic and impossibly high.
Think the unthinkable. As philosophers, we must learn to interpret accurately and to mean what we say. For example, what do you mean when you say incredible or unthinkable? Whatever it is, it's too vague. The only way to understand something fully is to be able to think the unthinkable and, at the same time, let the unthinkable remain unthinkable. If you can do that, you're improving. Right now, most of us cannot think the unthinkable. The few who can quickly discover that being able to think the unthinkable means that the unthinkable is no longer unthinkable. It's a thinkable unthinkable. So, bodhisattvas must be able to think the unthinkable while allowing the quality and the taste of unthinkable to remain.
Like the frog that lives in a well and has no desire to see the world outside, we need the courage to step out of our tiny worlds to get the hang of these ideas. I'm not suggesting that you manufacture a kind of gullibility for yourself. Thinking the unthinkable isn't about gullibility. It's about immeasurable mind. What we have to learn is how not to shun the unthinkable automatically and to accept that the impossible is possible. But how? By learning the impossible and possible are equal, and that possible is as absurd as impossible.
Okay, here it sounds like he's talking about Schrodinger's cat.
Hmm.
He's alive or dead is both at the same time. So, but this time with absurd or possible. But I do think that in a way, sometimes when you get to the limit of your knowledge, you can kind of glimpse what comes, what is still you don't know. So even if you can think, push yourself to the unthinkable, once that becomes understood, there's still so much more that you don't know and that you don't have the way of understanding that. So I do think that there's always something that is unthinkable that is not reachable
Sure.
as full understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, to me, it's similar to paradox in Zen. We're being able to hold two seemingly opposite things is what we're encouraged to do, to have that mind. And it also has to do with language, how language is very linear and very constructed and rational.
And limiting.
Mm-hmm. So Donna is not going to read, so we can.
Okay. This section of the Vimalakirti Sutra is full of similar explanations that form a thorough study of the incredible, the unthinkable, and the inconceivable. If I were to give it a title, it would be something like Explaining the Doings or The Ins and Outs of Incredibility. If you have the time, you should read it.
Practically speaking, we find it hard to think the unthinkable because we don't know how, and we can only talk about the unthinkable if we imagine it's somehow credible. So are we wasting our time? Vimalakirti says, no, we are not. Not at all. If we bite off a piece of the sky, it's not wrong to say that you have bitten the sky. If you swim at Copacabana Beach, it's not wrong to say that you have swum in the ocean, and that is how we begin.
None of those who follow Manjusri to Balasali that day were ordinary beings. Some were great bodhisattvas who had completely crushed mountains of dualistic thoughts, habits, and grasping, and had therefore freed themselves from the need to discern size, shape, height, color, right and wrong. At this point, having summoned thrones for them to sit on, Vimalakirti told the Arhats and Bodhisattvas that it was up to each individual to work out how to climb onto the throne. And once up there, they would also have to discover for themselves how to feel genuinely at ease.
The bodhisattvas jumped into their thrones without any trouble at all, but for some reason the arhat just couldn't. Even the great Sariputra couldn't hold in his mind the idea that a stupendously vast throne was also exactly the right size for his own comparatively tiny body. It could be like you or I lying in a bed the size of a football stadium. Would we be comfortable? No, because our mind simply could not cope with the apparent contradiction or how to handle it, and neither could the arhats.
Prostrate to the Buddha Merupadiparaja, the king of illumination, said Vimalakirti to Shariputra, if you do, you will accumulate enough merit to get past this awkwardness. On the face of it, the most obvious interpretation of what Vimalakirti is saying is that there's an individual called Merupadiparaja, that he is a mighty, truly existing godlike Buddha, and that he can grant all our wishes, including the ability to sit on and feel comfortable in a throne as high as a mountain and as wide as a football stadium. But I'm not sure that is what Vimalakirti meant here. Is there another interpretation? Yes, but it requires us to go beyond our petty theistic minds.
I think Vimalakirti might have been suggesting that we prostrate to Buddha Merupadiparaja isn't just a way of showing respect to an outer Buddha. It is a state of realization. By entering into the state of realization, the Arahats could shrug off what remained of their dualistic habit of making distinctions. Once that had gone, it would be much easier for them to cope with the awkwardness of ordinary sized human bodies sitting in vast thrones.
But why all the drama? Why go through all this rigmarole just so the arhats could sit comfortably on thrones? And why would the arhats accept the burden of praying to a Buddha just to sit on a throne? Which essentially is what Vimalakirti was telling the arhats to do. What this story does is lead us to the realization that through devotion and the accomplishment of Buddha Merupadiparaja, it is possible for a practitioner to transcend the awkwardness of having to make distinctions between large and small. That devotion to the Buddha Merupadiparaja is none other than devotion to absolute non-duality.
I have a question, if I may.
Please.
Oh, um, the thing, so the bodhisattvas are supposed to be enlightened beings that have stayed back in order to help enlighten the rest of us. So when here talking about Buddha Merupadiparaja, are could it be that it is he opened the path of how to stop making distinctions that impairs us to be able to sit in the throne comfortably? So is that not, so when it says the devotion, could that be understood as he has already understood how to do this and he's showing us the way of how to do that so we don't have to reinvent the wheel and we can get closer to enlightenment? Can that be understood that way?
Yeah, I think there's lots of ways to read it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that me?
Yeah, it's Cassie.
Manjushri. Manjushri starts the next conversation with a question. Vimalakirti, how should a bodhisattva look at a sentient being? A bodhisattva should look at a sentient being in the same way a wise person looks at the reflection of the moon in the water. Why should a bodhisattva see a sentient being as a reflection? We usually assume that a reflection is just a reflection, that it doesn't really exist. Yet, although a reflection doesn't truly exist, it's impossible to deny we can see the moon reflected on the surface of still water. And when the moon isn't obscured by clouds or the water muddy because clarity and emptiness arise at the same time, the moon's reflection is a complete, perfect, clear, and there as the moon in the sky. So what Vimalakirti seems to be saying is, if you believe a truly existing sentient being is out there somewhere, and that bodhisattvas can practice generating compassion for that being, you are effectively asserting that the person truly exists. Their problems and sufferings exist independently. The diagnosis of their problems is not subjective or fabricated, and the solution is not fabricated. It truly exists.
Imagine a doctor who specializes in the workings of the mind. His idea of normal is based on the books he read while studying for his PhD. And as a result, that kind of normal has become his goal. When he examines you, if you don't conform to his idea of normal, his diagnosis will be that you need help. The help he then gives you will be aimed at reshaping your mind. So, it looks like his kind of normal. Actually, though, you are and always have been far more normal than he ever was.
That's not all. When you try to help someone simply because you believe there is a problem, an object of that problem, a diagnosis of the problem, and a solution, you will end up becoming the victim of your own compassion, sorrow, and concern. The Californians have a word for it, codependency. For example, a woman tries to help her alcoholic husband, but in the process becomes ensnared in the problem of how to help, what help really is, not being able to help, and so on. What Vimalakirti is suggesting here is that a bodhisattva should look at the person they are trying to help in the same way we look at a moon's reflection in water.
He has other suggestions too. A bodhisattva should look at a sentient being in the same way a magician looks at a magical display he has just conjured. A bodhisattva shouldn't look at a sentient being in the same way you look at your own face in a mirror, like a mirage. How could a bodhisattva look at a sentient being who accomplishes the practice, and purifies defilements? In other words, how should a bodhisattva view a practitioner who is making progress?
Nilda, could you please read?
Yes. Look at the practitioner in the same way you look at the trail left by a bird flying in the sky. Of course, a flying bird leaves no trail. Therefore, according to Vimalakirti, There is no progress. Nothing is abandoned and nothing is achieved. All you can do is think that a bird flew from here to there. That is how a bodhisattva should view a practitioner's progress.
Most of us have hardly made any worthwhile progress on our spiritual path. In fact, very few of us have achieved anything at all. But how would you feel if your teacher told you directly that the little you imagined you have achieved is nothing more than the trail a bird leaves behind it as it flies in the sky? Would you be encouraged or disheartened? I suspect the latter.
I don't know. I thrill in bird flight, so
Yeah,
I
this
think I think it's the former.
And I told Kim the other day, after a little over 6 years of practice, I've learned so much and no less.
Good job.
That's what Kim said.
yeah, I'm reminded of that story about EQ, the teacher EQ, and hearing a crow caw and having a realization and going back to his teacher and explaining it, and the teacher saying, "No, sorry, that's not it." And EQ saying, "It's good enough for me." And the teacher saying, "That is it."
That's nice.
For several years, I couldn't walk. And one of the things that they had me do was try to move one, uh, try to move my foot. And the thing is that I remember being in the hospital, sitting with my feet on the ground and trying to move one foot, just trying to move it. After a long period, and it was the next appointment, and I'm trying again, and I finally got to move my foot, but it was like 2 millimeters. It's a very tiny, tiny amount. And I was disheartened. And the physical therapist, she was so happy. I mean, she was just like over the moon. And I'm like, why are you so excited about this? There's nothing. And she's like, that is so much more than you realize. Any movement you can make is amazing. So she taught me to give credit to it. So, yeah, I wanted to share that because even if, I mean, a bird when it flies, oh my Lord, they can move.
Thank you. Yeah. So, said Manjushri to Vimalakirti, if a bodhisattva sees sentient beings as mirages and reflections and so on, how can that bodhisattva then generate love for those very same sentient beings? When a bodhisattva sees a sentient being as a mirage, a reflection, or the trail left by a flying bird, replied Vimalakirti, there is no trace of assumption, expectation, or judgment in his view. The way he sees the sentient being is not deceptive. As he is not deceived by his own view of sentient beings, there is no deception at all. Isn't that love? Hmm. So it's 8 o'clock. So maybe that's a good place to stop. And it's a little bit after 8 o'clock. And process or express or write or like to read what they wrote or show what they created. Express themselves. Share their dharma.
I can read.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
I said, summer raindrops bounced down upon this pavement, up and down, and then wandered together into a little stream flowing to the gutters, to the sewers, to the rivers. At night, the outdoor lamps turned on and cast their lights in glittering sparkles on the road. Perhaps it was the water or the sparkles of light that brought the little frogs to the middle of the street. Bathed in the light of passing cars, we watched one flatten under racing wheels and cried. It was that frog's time. Perhaps it had ascended to nirvana at last, but we clung to it with sadness on our sidewalks of the ground. Another night, I stopped the car because there was no one behind me. I stepped out into the gentle drizzle, bent down to the frog in the middle of the road, and touched its tiny bum. It sprang a perfect coil into the dewy grass of a yard, away from the drama of a moonlit road. It did not ascend to nirvana that night, but leapt towards home, and I was happy I was not the instrument of its ascendance and destruction. The truth is, I shouldn't cling so hard to my stories of these little frogs, except that even as the decades pass, the moon, the rain, the night, the little frogs turn in my mind and still offer me their teachings, little Buddhas of rainy summer nights.
That took me right to my childhood of playing with frogs, living in Brownsville, Texas. It was would build little mazes for them to move around in. It was like the thing we did in the neighborhood was play with frogs. So I also appreciated the deeper parts of what you wrote, but the content like struck that child place in me. I'll go ahead and go since I'm talking. So the quote, to prostrate to Buddha Mura Prada Parajar isn't just a way of showing our respect to outer Buddha. It is a state of realization. And then my reaction was, it's not all about you. And that does not mean that you are not here. For here, I'm welcoming dualistic thoughts again. If it's not about me, then I don't show up at all. The goal of extremist thoughts is to tip the scale. And then the quote, a palace with no chairs, where do we sit? Oh, the importance of having a place. I really get that one. Those who long for a seat to sit in are not looking for dharma. To wish for a seat, he said, means you are looking for a foundation, a reference, a dogma, a system. It means you want to nest. I do want to belong, and I sense its deep roots of being excluded in the religion and family of my birth. I would always have one cushion in the Zendo that I went back to. That sense of place is really foundational with me. The way cow dung drops to the ground once it hits the earth, shit doesn't move. Similarly, once we get stuck with an idea, I do know about shit not moving, the Dharma wheel being stuck, and the skillful means of meeting it with compassion for as long as it takes. The double helix of sitting and using the tools that we have today to gently place a wedge under the wheel and hold and rock that wheel until it moves.
I want to say, Cassie, that I so feel you, and I want to say that in what we have read, it said that we need compassion towards others, but I think you're also making the case that we also need to have compassion for ourselves. And I do hope you feel that you belong now. And following your example, I will go ahead and read what I wrote. I want to sit on a throne too large for me and do it so comfortably. I find myself suffering today. The suffering won't stop because I am bound to uncertainty. A throne I don't find comfortable, nor my size, but I am trying. I'm trying to understand uncertainty, understand that it is intrinsic to life, that the illusion is certainty. To accept this truth and not to be swallowed by the abyss of fear would make me feel comfortable in the throne of future.
Thank you.
Very well said. I guess if we're going to all follow our comments, I will read what I wrote. Today's reading feels to me like being in a sea of letting go, of being aware that there is a sea, aware that the sea feels freeing, that the wind is blowing, the waves are moving, and just being aware. I can try to imagine doing that. Hard for me because all the sensations of the sea, all of my senses of the sea, all the pleasure the sea brings to me draws me into that nest. The other side of the sea, the hurricanes and tsunamis that it produces, the fear it brings, the sentient beings it contains and often tosses up and away, that is not the part I want. Yet it serves its purpose and is so much harder to just be aware of, just be aware and be with it. Not fighting it, not trying to fix it, just being aware of it. To leave the physical and emotional and yes, spiritualness of it and just be aware of it. Like seeing it all, excuse me, like seeing it all only out of the corner of an eye, stopping the head from turning towards it, just being aware that it is there. It almost makes my chest hurt with the effort. My mind wants so much to make the awareness into something more complicated, more adventurous, more real. To just be aware seems on the face of it to be so easy, but I think it may be the most difficult thing I could ever do. And I wonder who or what would be there just being aware of me.
These are really wonderful.
I can read. Linda and I have had a long-standing argument about my friends, a rhino, a penguin, and 3 dogs. She says they are imaginary, and I say that's wrong. They just are lacking a little of what we are, but they are as real as love. Like other kids, they go to school every day and usually get in trouble. We are called in for teacher conferences. She refuses to go, so most of the parenting is left to me. And the kids don't listen to me, which is probably fortunate because they are much smarter than I. How are they different than my sisters and parents who are also in my head? How might I finally remove invisible from Linda's vocabulary? If only she'd go with me to their school when they misbehave, maybe she'd see that they have a very real life and they are the jewels of my eyes.
Kim, please, you need to make that one into a book.
Well, there's more stories about these kids too. So I think, we still have a minute.
If somebody else would like to read. No? No? Thank you all so much. See you next Monday. Well,
Thank you.
think the
Thank you.
unthinkable.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good to be
everyone.
with
Good
you.
Good
night.
night. Kim, I mean it. Make it into a book. That is seriously special.
Well, thank you for the encouragement. Well, good night.
Good night.
Hey, did you send a book of? Did I send it to you, or did they send it to you? A book of Elaine's stuff?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
good, good.
yes. I did receive it, and I'm very grateful that I got it.
Oh, good, good. Okay, take care.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.